The night was silent across the alien moon. A cold wind moved over the empty plains carrying dust and the smell of burned metal. From the sky, a fireball had fallen, tearing through the clouds like a blazing comet. It was not a comet. It was a human supply ship now broken and scattered. Inside the wreckage, one man moved slowly. His name was Daniel, a cargo pilot who never thought he would end up like this. His head hurt. His side burned with pain and the air smelled of smoke. He coughed, pulling himself out of the wreck, and looked around. The wilderness was strange. Dark rocks shaped like teeth, glowing plants that pulsed softly, and no signs of life. Daniel staggered, his uniform torn. His survival pack was gone. Food supplies burned away. The comms unit was crushed under twisted metal. He knew one truth. No signal meant no rescue. At least not soon. He looked up at the endless sky, wondering if he would die here. Then he heard it. A sound he could not mistake. A soft, high-pitched cry. It came from behind the shattered hull. Daniel froze. His first thought was hallucination. He had hit his head, but the cry came again, weak but real. Carefully he moved around the wreck, and there, hidden under broken panels, was something he never expected. A tiny alien girl. She could not have been more than 6 years old in human terms. Her body was small, fragile, her skin pale with a faint blue glow. Her large eyes were wet. With tears, her clothing was torn, and her little arms wrapped around herself as if she had been hiding for hours. Daniel stared, his mind racing. He had heard stories of alien children but never seen one. She looked so weak, trembling. Yet when her eyes met his, there was fear, but also hope. She reached a hand toward him, tiny fingers shaking. For a moment, Daniel hesitated. He was a human alone, and this girl, this alien child, was a mystery. What if she was dangerous, or carried something deadly? But then the cry came again, soft, desperate, and his heart broke. She was just a child, and she was alone. Daniel knelt slowly, ignoring the pain in his ribs. He spoke gently, though he knew she might not understand. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The girl blinked, her chest rising and falling quickly. She whispered something, a broken sound. It wasn't human speech, but the tone was clear. She was begging for help. Carefully, Daniel lifted the wreckage off her. The girl winced but made no sound of anger or hate. When she was free, she clung to his arm. Her body was cold, trembling against his. Daniel felt her bones through her skin. She was starving, weak, and yet alive. The night grew colder, and Daniel knew they couldn't stay in the open. He pulled her close and led her back into the least damaged part of the wreck. Sparks still flickered on the walls, but it gave them some shelter. He sat against the wall, holding her near. She pressed her head against his chest, breathing fast. Daniel's stomach growled. He had not eaten since before the crash. His throat was dry. His survival instincts screamed for food and water. But the world outside was empty. The alien moon was cruel, silent, and lifeless. He looked down at the girl, who stared at him with wide eyes. She seemed to understand his pain. For a moment he wondered, how could she survive here alone before the crash? What had she been through? The fire outside burned lower and the night stretched on. Every shadow looked like movement. Every sound made his heart race. He thought of the predators that might live on this world, and the girl's small hand tightened around his arm. She was scared too, Daniel whispered. "We'll survive, I promise." Though he had no idea how. The girl tilted her head as if she recognized the tone. She whispered something again, words he could not know, but the way she said them made him feel less alone. Hours passed. His body weakened. Hunger and thirst cut into him. He leaned his head back, eyes heavy, but every time he almost slipped into sleep. The girl's soft breathing reminded him he had to stay awake. He had to protect her, even if he could barely protect himself. In the silence, Daniel realized something. This was not just about him anymore. He had someone depending on him. A tiny, alien girl, fragile as glass, yet somehow stronger than he imagined, for she had survived until now, and with her by his side, maybe he could too. The wind howled again, shaking the wreck. Daniel closed his eyes, whispering to himself, "Tomorrow we search for food. Tomorrow we fight to live." And with the alien girl pressed close, the night slowly faded into the first light of dawn, a strange beginning to a bond that would decide their fate. The dawn came slowly across the alien moon. Pale light spread over jagged rocks and glowing plants. Daniel sat inside the broken wreck, his back against cold metal. His body felt heavy, his lips dry, and every breath carried weakness beside him. The tiny alien girl slept curled against his side. Her little hand still gripped his sleeve as if afraid he would vanish. When she woke, her big eyes blinked at him with both fear and trust. She whispered something soft in her strange language. Daniel could not understand, but the tone was clear. She was hungry. Her fragile body trembled, her skin glowing faintly blue in the dim light. Daniel pressed his hand to his own stomach. His hunger was sharp, twisting like a knife. He had searched the wreckage already. There was no food, no water, no survival kit left. The crash had destroyed everything. He looked out at the barren landscape. It stretched far into the horizon, nothing but lifeless stone and plants that looked toxic. He muttered under his breath, "We're trapped." The girl tilted her head, watching him with wide eyes, as if sensing his pain. She moved closer and pressed a hand against her chest. At first, Daniel thought she was just pointing at herself, but she kept repeating the gesture, eyes locked on him. Confused, Daniel frowned. "What are you trying to say?" she whispered again, then opened her torn clothing slightly. Her small chest glowed faintly, and she gestured again, pressing her palm against herself and then toward him. The realization struck him. His heart skipped. She was offering her milk. Daniel's breath caught. He shook his head at first. "No, I can't." The very idea felt wrong. She was an alien child, fragile and innocent. He was a grown man, yet her eyes pleaded, desperate and unafraid. She knew he was starving, and she had chosen to share what little her body could give. His throat burned. He had no choice. Survival screamed inside him. If he refused, both of them would weaken and die. Slowly, with trembling hands, he accepted her offer. The milk tasted strange, thick and sweet, almost glowing faintly as it touched his tongue. For a heartbeat he feared poison, but then warmth spread through his chest. His mind cleared, his muscles steadied. The ache in his belly softened. The girl watched him with tired eyes. Then she gave a tiny smile, as if relieved. She leaned against him, breathing easier. Daniel stared at her in shock. She had just saved him. Time passed slowly. Daniel felt strength return bit by bit. The hunger did not vanish, but it no longer tore at him with claws. He touched the girl's head gently. "Thank you," he whispered, though she might not understand. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with something almost human. Trust, but guilt also grew in Daniel's chest. He had taken from her from a child. What if she grew weaker now? He cursed under his breath, standing quickly. He could not rely on her alone. He had to find something, anything, to keep them alive. Stepping outside, the cold wind bit his skin. The alien sky was vast. 2 suns faint in the distance, casting broken shadows. Daniel searched the land. His legs shook, but he forced himself forward. He found plants with glowing fruit, but the smell burned his nose. He dared not risk poison. He saw pools of liquid under rocks, shimmering silver, but the air above them stank of acid. He backed away. Hours passed, his throat dry again, his body heavier. The girl followed him outside. Her small steps unsteady, she tugged at his arm and pointed back toward the wreck. Her meaning was clear. She wanted him to rest. Daniel knelt, exhausted. Sweat covered his face. His heart pounded with shame. He had failed to find food. He was weaker than he thought. But when the girl sat beside him, pressing her tiny body against his arm, he realized something. He was not alone. Night began to fall again. Shadows stretched long, the cries of strange, Creatures echoed from the cliffs. The girl clung to him tighter. Daniel gathered broken panels from the wreck to form a small barrier. It would not hold against real predators, but it gave them the illusion of safety. As the wind grew colder, the hunger returned, biting at him. The girl looked up again, repeating, her gesture pressing her chest and then pointing at him. He whispered, "You shouldn't. You'll get weaker." But her eyes were steady. She did not hesitate. She wanted him to live. Reluctantly, he accepted once more. The milk warmed him again, filling his veins with strength. It was more than just food. It carried something alive, a strange energy. His heartbeat steadied, his mind sharper. He felt almost human again, almost strong. The girl smiled faintly and leaned her head against his chest. For the first time, Daniel felt a bond forming, not of words, but of survival. He realized that this fragile creature had chosen to share her very lifeline with him, and he would not waste it. Looking into the dark sky, Daniel whispered to himself, "I will protect her. I don't care what comes. I won't let her down." The tiny alien girl closed her eyes, trusting his promise. The wilderness howled outside. Hunger still lurked in the shadows, but in that broken wreck, two unlikely companions leaned against each other, alive for one more night. The second night on the alien moon was long. Daniel lay against the cold wall of the wreck. The tiny alien girl pressed close to him. He could hear her slow breathing, her small body trembling as she drifted into restless sleep. Outside the broken panels, strange sounds moved through the wilderness. Low growls, clicking noises, and the rustle of unseen creatures in the dark. Every sound made Daniel's heart pound. He gripped a piece of twisted metal he had sharpened into a crude weapon. He knew if something came for them, his body was too weak to fight, yet he forced his eyes to stay open. For hours he stayed awake, only resting when dawn finally crept. Across the barren land, when the light came, Daniel's body screamed with exhaustion. His stomach twisted again, though not as painfully as before. The girl's gift had kept him alive, yet he could not rely on her alone. He knew this truth clearly. If he kept drinking her milk, she might weaken or worse, die, and he could not let that happen. He rose slowly, ignoring the ache in his side. The girl sat up and watched him. Her large, glowing eyes blinked with curiosity. When Daniel stepped outside, she followed him, clutching his sleeve tightly. He tried to tell her to stay, but she shook her head firmly. She would not be left alone. Together they moved across the sharp rocks. The land stretched in every direction, broken and lifeless. The two suns above gave little warmth, casting strange shadows that seemed to move. Daniel searched for anything, a plant, an animal, even a drop of clean water. The girl pointed now and then, her voice soft, speaking words he could not understand. At last, Daniel spotted something. A group of small creatures crawling on the rocks. They looked like insects the size of his hand, their shells glowing faintly in the light. They moved in groups, clicking as they climbed. Daniel crouched low, his pulse racing. If they were alive, they might be food. He picked up a rock and threw it. The stone hit one of the creatures, cracking its shell. The others scattered quickly, leaving the injured one twitching on the ground. Daniel hurried forward, the girl clinging tightly to his arm. He knelt and examined it. Its body oozed glowing fluid. The smell was sharp, bitter. He hesitated. Was it poison? Could it be eaten? He looked at the girl, hoping for an answer. She tilted her head, then shook it slowly. Her eyes warned him. Danger. Daniel sighed, dropping the broken creature. Even when food appeared, it seemed the land itself wanted them dead. Hours passed with no success. The suns moved higher, heat pressing down. Daniel's throat burned again. His legs wobbled. He stumbled and fell against a rock. The girl rushed to his side, pressing her small hands against him as if trying to hold him upright. Daniel felt shame. He was supposed to protect her, yet she was the one keeping him moving. By the time they returned to the wreck, Daniel's body felt ready to collapse. Hunger returned sharper now. His chest ached. The girl stared at him with worried eyes. Then, without hesitation, She pressed her chest again, offering him her milk. He shook his head, whispering, "No, not again. You'll get weaker." But she pushed closer, her eyes shining with stubborn light. She wanted him to live. She wanted them both to live. Finally, with heavy guilt, Daniel accepted the moment he drank. Warmth spread through his veins again. His mind cleared, his muscles steadied. It was not just food, it was life itself. Something in her milk carried power beyond human understanding. Energy, healing, strength. It made him feel alive again when he looked at her afterward. He saw her smile faintly, tired but happy. She leaned her head against his shoulder, whispering something in her soft alien tongue. Daniel could not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. She trusted him. That night, Daniel felt different. For the first time since the crash, he believed they might survive. He still feared predators, still feared hunger, but the bond between them was stronger than any fear. She had given him life, and in return, he swore silently to give her protection. As the stars filled the alien sky, Daniel sat awake, the girl sleeping soundly against him. He whispered into the silence, "We're not dying here. Not you, not me. We'll find a way." And for the first time since the crash, hope flickered inside his chest. A fragile hope, born from the gift of a tiny alien girl. The fourth night came heavy with silence. Daniel sat inside the wreck with the tiny alien girl pressed against his side. He had gathered scraps of metal during the day, forming a rough wall across the open gaps of the broken hull. It was not much, but it gave him the feeling of safety. The girl slept lightly, her small body shivering. Daniel stroked her head gently, his mind restless. He had learned one thing about this moon. It was not empty. It breathed with hidden life, sounds that rose only when the sun sank below the horizon. Growls rolled across the distant cliffs, and strange chirps echoed like whispers. Daniel gripped the shard of metal he had sharpened into a blade. His heart beat hard in his chest. His body was stronger now, thanks to the girl's gift, yet still fragile. He knew if predators came, strength alone would not be enough. As the night deepened, the fire he had built from broken wires and burning scraps began to fade. Darkness poured inside the wreck. The girl stirred, her glowing eyes opening. She sat up suddenly, her small ears twitching. Daniel froze, listening. A sound drifted closer. Slow, steps, claws scratching against stone. The low growl came again, deeper this time. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He rose slowly, putting himself between the girl and the wreck's opening. Shadows shifted beyond the broken panels. Glowing yellow eyes blinked in the dark. One pair became two, then three, then more. They circled the wreck like wolves. Their bodies were large, lean, covered in spiked fur. Their teeth flashed when the firelight touched them. Daniel tightened his grip on the metal shard. His voice was low, whispering to the girl, "Stay behind me, don't move." The creatures crept closer, their growls turned to snarls. Daniel's heart pounded, sweat covered his palms. He swung the shard when the first beast lunged. The blade scraped across its side, leaving a glowing cut. The creature yelped but did not fall. The others hissed, their eyes burning brighter. Daniel stumbled back, forcing himself to stay between them and the girl. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to run. The wreck was their only shelter. Another predator leapt, forward, teeth snapping. Daniel blocked with his arm, pain tearing through him as claws ripped his sleeve. He struck wildly with the shard, driving the beast back. His chest heaved. He could not fight them all. The girl whimpered, pressing her small body against the wall. Daniel turned his head for only a second to look at her. "Stay strong. We'll get through this," he whispered. Then it happened. The girl stood, her glowing eyes wide. She opened her mouth and released a sound unlike anything Daniel had ever heard. It was a scream, high and sharp, but it carried energy. The air itself trembled. The predators froze, their ears flattening. Their snarls turned to cries of pain. They stumbled back, eyes flickering with fear. Daniel stared in shock. The girl's small body shook, yet her scream grew louder. The creatures backed away, yelping. Retreating into the shadows, one by one, their glowing eyes vanished into the dark. The wilderness fell silent again. The scream ended. The girl collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. Her glow dimmed. She looked weak, fragile as glass. Daniel rushed to her, kneeling. He held her carefully. "You saved us," he whispered, his voice breaking. She looked up at him, her lips trembling. She whispered a single soft word he could not understand, but the meaning was clear. She had chosen to protect him too. Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her close. His body shook with both relief and fear. He looked out at the dark wilderness. The predators had gone for now, but they would return, he knew it. This moon was alive with danger, and now he understood something terrifying. The girl was not just a child. She was something more. Her milk had given him strength. Her scream had driven monsters away. Daniel realized her species carried powers humans could not imagine. And if predators hunted them, perhaps others were hunting her too. He whispered into her hair, "I'll protect you no matter what." His words were a vow. His arms tightened around her. The girl closed her eyes, falling into exhausted sleep. Her body trembled in his hold, but her trust was unshaken. Daniel stayed awake until the suns returned, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He was no longer only a survivor. He was a guardian, a man and a fragile alien girl, bound together by danger, hunger, and something deeper than either of them could explain. And as the dawn lit the alien world, Daniel understood. This was only the beginning. The sun rose weakly over the jagged cliffs, casting long shadows across the wreckage. Daniel sat awake, his eyes red from another sleepless night. The tiny alien girl rested in his arms, her small body weak after the scream that had saved them from the predators. Her glow had dimmed, her breathing soft and fragile. Daniel brushed a hand through her fine hair, whispering, "You're stronger than you know." He looked at the ground, torn between awe and fear. That scream was not natural. It had carried power, a force that even the predators of this moon could not withstand. He wondered what else she was hiding, what else she could do. As the girl stirred, her glowing eyes blinked open. She tried to sit up, but her body trembled. Daniel helped her lean against him. She placed her tiny hand on her chest again, then touched his arm. Her lips moved, forming words in her language Daniel could not understand, but her tone was serious, not playful or afraid like before. She drew a line with her finger across his palm, leaving a faint glow that faded quickly. Daniel froze, his heart skipped. He had seen marks like this before, not in real life, but in reports, in whispers told by old pilots. Stories of alien bloodlines, children born with powers that whole empires feared. Daniel looked at her, realization dawning. "You're not just anyone, are you?" he whispered. She tilted her head, then pressed her glowing fingers to her own forehead. Then she pointed upward, to the skies. Her meaning was clear. She came from somewhere important, from people far above this forgotten moon. Daniel felt a shiver run through him. If she was special, then she was also hunted. The crash had not been random. He remembered the strange burn marks on the wreckage, the unnatural way the engines had failed. It wasn't an accident. Someone wanted her dead. The girl spoke again, her voice low. Then she pressed her small hand against his chest. Her touch was warm, almost comforting. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He understood without words. She was trusting him, telling him something she could not explain. He was the one she needed. Suddenly, the sound of engines roared across the sky. Daniel's head snapped up, far above. Shapes moved in the light, dark and sharp. Alien ships. They moved in slow circles, scanning the ground. Daniel cursed under his breath. His suspicion was true. They were searching for her. The girl's eyes widened, her body stiff with fear. She clung to Daniel's sleeve, whispering rapidly in her tongue. He didn't need a translation. Her people, or her enemies, had come. He stood quickly, his body tense. "We need to hide," he said firmly. They left the wreck and moved toward the cliffs. Daniel half carried her, his ribs aching with every step. The girl pointed to a narrow crack in the rocks. Daniel squeezed inside, pulling her with him. The crevice was dark, the air heavy, but it was cover. Outside, the ships descended lower. Beams of light scanned the ground. Daniel held the girl close, covering her glowing skin with his arms, praying they would not see. The engines rumbled overhead, growing louder, closer. His breath caught. He could almost feel the heat of their thrusters against the rocks. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the sound faded, the ships drifting away into the distance. Daniel let out a shaky breath. His heart hammered in his chest. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wet. He realized she was crying, but not only from fear. She whispered a single word, repeating it until it became clear she wanted him to understand. Daniel tilted his head. Bloodline, he guessed. Her eyes widened. She nodded. He sat in silence, the truth settling on him. She was the daughter of someone powerful, perhaps a leader, maybe even royalty. She carried abilities that made her a target. Her milk carried strength. Her scream carried destruction, and her glowing marks whispered of something more. Daniel clenched his fists. He was only a pilot, a man who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But fate had thrown this child into his arms, and now she was his responsibility. He could not abandon her, not when hunters were in the skies above. As they returned carefully to the wreck, Daniel looked at the girl with new eyes. She was not just his lifeline. She was a secret the galaxy wanted, a secret worth killing for. That night, as the stars returned, Daniel whispered into the silence, "They'll come back, but they won't take you, I promise." The girl leaned against him, whispering softly in her language. Though he could not understand the words, he knew what she was saying. She believed him. And in that moment, Daniel felt the weight of his vow heavier than ever before. He was no longer just surviving. He was protecting something priceless, a child whose bloodline could change the stars themselves. The night sky glowed faintly with 2 moons. Daniel sat at the edge of the wreck, staring upward. His body ached, his stomach twisted with hunger, but his mind was sharp. He could not forget the shadows of ships that had passed earlier. Scanning the land, they were searching for her. The tiny alien girl sat close to him, her glowing eyes fixed on the dark horizon. She seemed restless, her little hands gripping his sleeve tightly. Daniel brushed her hair gently, whispering, "They'll come back." She shivered but nodded as if she already knew. Suddenly the silence broke. The deep roar of engines rolled across the land. Daniel's heart pounded. He looked up and saw them. Sleek alien ships descending through the clouds. Their hulls gleamed in the light of the twin moons, long and sharp like blades. This time they weren't just passing, they were landing. The girl whimpered, hiding her face against his chest. Daniel pulled her close, his arms tightening around her. He forced his breath to stay calm. "We need to move," he muttered. He scanned the wreckage quickly. His eyes caught broken panels and scattered wires. He had no real weapons, no guns, nothing but sharp metal and courage. Still, he could not simply wait. From the ships, figures emerged, tall, armored hunters with glowing visors. Their movements were precise, practiced. They carried weapons that hummed with power. Daniel counted 6 at first, then more. His chest tightened. They weren't scavengers or random soldiers. They were a hunting party. The girl tugged at his sleeve, whispering quickly. Daniel didn't understand the words, but her fear was clear. He looked into her glowing eyes and shook his head. "I won't let them take you." He moved fast, dragging metal scraps to block the wreck's entrance. He crouched low with the girl behind him, his mind raced. If he tried to run, they would see. If he stayed, they would search. The only choice was to fight with whatever he had. The hunters, spread out, their voices echoing in a harsh alien tongue. One pointed toward the wreck. A beam of light swept across the ground, growing brighter as it neared them. Daniel clenched his jaw. Sweat dripped down his face. His grip tightened on the jagged metal shard. The first hunter stepped inside. His armor gleamed, his weapon raised, Daniel's muscles tensed. He leapt forward with desperate strength, swinging his shard. The blade scraped across the hunter's chest, sparks flying. The alien staggered but did not fall. With a growl, it swung its weapon, the blast missing Daniel by inches. Daniel rolled across the floor, pain shooting through his ribs. He swung again, striking the hunter's arm. The weapon clattered to the ground. The alien hissed in rage, but before it could recover, Daniel slammed the shard deep into its side. The hunter collapsed with a heavy thud. The girl screamed softly. Her small body trembled as she pressed against the wall. Daniel turned, blood pounding in his ears. The other hunters rushed toward the wreck, their footsteps heavy, their voices sharp. He grabbed the fallen weapon and raised it. The alien technology pulsed in his hands, strange but powerful. The next hunter appeared. Daniel fired without thinking. A beam of blue light burst from the weapon, striking the alien square in the chest. It fell back, armor cracking. For a moment, Daniel almost smiled, but then he heard the roar of more engines, more hunters landing. The girl pulled at his arm. Whispering quickly, her voice urgent, Daniel turned to her. Her glowing eyes shone brighter than ever. She pressed her tiny hand against his chest, whispering one word again and again. He didn't understand the language, but he felt it. She was telling him to fight to survive. The hunters stormed the wreck. Daniel fired wildly, each blast shaking his arms. The girl screamed again, her high-pitched cry echoing through the air. The sound made the hunters hesitate, covering their ears. Daniel used the chance, striking with everything he had. One by one they fell, but more kept coming. Daniel's body shook, his breath ragged. He knew he couldn't last, still he fought, not for himself, but for her. Every time he thought of falling, he looked at her tiny face, her trust, her desperate need for him, and it gave him strength. Finally, silence fell. Smoke filled the wreck. Bodies lay scattered outside. Daniel dropped the weapon, his arms trembling, his chest burned with exhaustion. He fell to his knees, gasping. The girl rushed to him, her small hands clutching his face. Her eyes glowed bright with tears. He whispered weakly, "We made it." She shook her head, whispering again, pointing at the sky. Daniel looked up. His blood ran cold. In the distance, more ships moved across the stars, larger and heavier. The true hunters had only just begun to arrive. Daniel pulled the girl into his arms. His voice was firm despite his weakness. "No matter how many come, they won't take you." She buried her face against his chest, and together, they waited for the storm that was far from over. The night burned with fire in the sky. Daniel held the tiny alien girl close as the horizon glowed with the lights of new ships descending. These were not small hunters like before. These were heavy carriers, bringing more soldiers, stronger, weapons and the promise of death. Daniel's body was weak, his wounds stung, his arms trembled, but his eyes were sharp. He knew this was the end. Unless he did something impossible. The girl clung to him, her glowing eyes wet with tears. She whispered softly in her alien tongue, repeating words over and over. Daniel could not understand. But he felt the meaning. She was begging him not to give up. The wreck was no longer safe. Smoke rose from shattered metal, and the ground was littered with broken alien armor. The air smelled of blood and fire. Daniel looked at the glowing sky and whispered, "We can't stay here." He pulled the girl into his arms and forced himself to stand. His ribs screamed with pain, but he pushed forward. They moved toward the cliffs, stumbling across sharp rocks. The girl pointed weakly to a narrow path leading deeper into the canyons. Daniel nodded and followed. The sounds of engines grew louder behind them. Voices echoed, hunters shouting commands. They were closing in. Daniel ducked into the canyon, pressing his back against the stone. His breath came in gasps. The girl's glow lit the path faintly. She looked up at him with trembling lips, whispering again. This time she pressed her tiny hand against his chest, then against her own. Then she pointed at the sky. Daniel froze, understanding flickering. She wanted him to know the truth. Her bloodline, her powers, her very life were more important than his. She was telling him to leave her behind, to run and save himself. He shook his head violently, gripping her shoulders. "No, I'm not leaving you." His voice cracked. "We survive together, or not at all." The girl's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head too, but Daniel pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. His words were firm. "You gave me life. Now I'll give you mine if I have to." The hunters entered the canyon, armored and armed. Their glowing visors swept the darkness. Daniel raised the alien weapon he had taken earlier. Its charge was nearly gone, but he aimed it with steady hands. The first beam fired, striking one soldier down. The others shouted, returning fire. Blue light burned against the rocks. Daniel moved fast, dragging the girl behind cover. His body ached with every motion. His strength came not from his flesh, but from her, from the bond they had built. Each time he thought of surrender, he looked at her face, fragile and glowing, and he stood taller. The fight raged. Hunters pressed closer. Daniel fired again. Another fell, but the weapon dimmed, losing power. He cursed, tossing it aside. Gripping a sharp piece of wreckage, he charged forward with a roar. His strike cut across another soldier's chest, sparks flying. He was a man against an army, but his will burned brighter than their numbers. Then the girl screamed again, her high-pitched cry echoing through the canyon. The sound shook the very stone. Hunters staggered, clutching their helmets. Daniel seized the chance, striking down. Two more. The girl's glow burst brighter. Her markings across her arms and face lit like fire. Daniel realized she was no longer holding back. She was unleashing her bloodline's power, but the effort drained her. Her small body collapsed. Falling into Daniel's arms, he caught her, his chest tightening with fear. Her glow flickered weakly. Her breaths came shallow. Daniel whispered, "No. Stay with me. Please." He held her tight. The hunters saw her fall and shouted louder. They knew what she was. They wanted her alive. Daniel's eyes blazed with fury. He stood tall, holding her in one arm, his shard in the other. "You won't touch her," he growled. His voice carried across the canyon like thunder. He fought with the strength of a dying man who had already made peace with death. Every swing was desperate, every strike carved from pure will. Hunters fell one by one, but more poured in. Surrounding him, weapons raised, Daniel dropped to one knee, the girl limp in his arms, his body broken, his eyes lifted to the glowing sky. "If this is death, then so be it," he whispered, pressing a kiss to the girl's forehead. "At least I kept my promise." But then, the roar of engines filled the air again, not enemy ships this time. Daniel's eyes widened as massive shadows swept across the canyon. Human ships, battered but strong, descended with weapons blazing. Missiles rained on the hunters, tearing them apart. Soldiers in Terran armor stormed the ground, their rifles cutting through the enemy. Daniel fell back against the rocks, barely believing. The girl stirred weakly, her glowing eyes flickering open. She looked at the ships above, whispering faintly. Daniel smiled through blood and exhaustion. "We're saved." As Terran soldiers lifted them to safety, Daniel held her close, his voice soft but firm. "You're safe now, little one." Her small hand gripped his shirt, and for the first time since the crash, Daniel let himself believe it. They had survived not by luck, but by the bond of a man and a tiny alien girl, bound together in hunger, in fear and in hope. And as the Terran ships carried them into the stars, Daniel knew their story was far from over. It was only the beginning.